Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Good. Nick Dunnom, business broker with Sunbelt Business Advisors, True North M&A. More on that here in a little bit. And I'm joined by
Emily Rose with Entrepreneur Fund, and we do lending and advising.
So before we get into the presentation and who we are and kind of why we're up here, to help illustrate that. Well, Emily and I got together last Friday, I think it was, and we had done a presentation similar to this for the Chamber of Commerce back in October. And it was really titled Buying a Business, right? It's going to have kind of a similar roadmap, but it's just going to be more of an uplift for entrepreneurship in general, this presentation is. And when we were doing that, you'll have to forgive us. It's a little bit choppy, the cadence of this presentation. However, it's going to be it's going to have a lot of valuable information, I think. I hope you guys share that sentiment as well. And one thing that I have found that will make any presentation worthwhile, even if it's not as polished as it should be, is if you come bearing gifts. I have with me a bottle of Doña Paula, which is a high altitude, 70% Maybach, if I'm pronouncing that correct, 30% Syrah. Apparently it has spicy notes, aged in French oak barrels for 14 to 16 months, and a couple of good books if that's your idea. So to help illustrate why we're up here and talking about entrepreneurship being a force for good, we'll start off with a little bit of a trivia question, which if you've been to any of my presentations, you know I like to start off with kind of something fun to get you all engaged. But for today's trivia question, Emily and I were kind of thinking about what to do. And Minnesota is actually a very highly entrepreneurial state. So nationwide, on average, it's about 4% of the population that are entrepreneurs, business owners, whether it's sole proprietors, LLCs, corporations, that sort of thing. Here in Minnesota, the most recent number I've heard is 7%. So almost twice as entrepreneurial as anywhere in the country. And because of that, we have a ton of small businesses here in Minnesota. 525,000 small businesses just here in Minnesota alone. Now, of those 525,000 businesses, 116,000 have at least one employee, right? Making it kind of not above and beyond in a sense of better status, but above and beyond a sole proprietorship, right? There's probably a brick and mortar or some sort of facility, right, that that allows for really the infrastructure of business to begin taking place, right? Now, with that in mind, here's the trivia question. Bear with, I had to lay the groundwork, right? Of the, I don't even know how to phrase it. I've never done this one before, but so the question is, because of the 116,000 small businesses with at least one employee, what percentage of the, I'll phrase it like this. What percentage of the employed workforce in Minnesota do you think is employed by small business here in Minnesota? If you had to guess a percentage, first closest to the right answer gets their pick of whatever they'd like. So don't all shout at once. 30%, good guess. 40%, good guess. Anybody else? 32%, good guess. Anybody else? 27, good guess. We're heading in the wrong direction though. 50 is getting pretty close. The closest right, the most recent statistics I have from last year is 46%. 1.3 million employees employed by small businesses. So who was closest to 46? I think I heard you said 50? Well done. What would you like? Wine or a book? We're judging. Grit by Angela Duckworth. Thank you. How about a round of applause? So that's why we're here today, right? And that's why we're presenting on the topic, is because small business is not just, I may have a leaning bias as a small business owner and entrepreneur. I think it is a great way towards financial wealth and independence and all that sort of stuff, but it's also critical. I mean, it's the lifeblood of our communities, especially in rural Minnesota. I mean, I'd be willing to argue that in small town rural Minnesota, 46% doesn't even come close to sniffing what the actual statistic is for people who are employed by small business. I mean, outside of Dollar General, I can't really think of, and government agencies perhaps, right? I can't really think of a whole lot of other companies that are non-small business here in Ely, Minnesota. So with that said, do you want to do a little intro on you and the business, or did you already do that?
I can do a little bit more. So Entrepreneur Fund is here to help businesses through any stage of their journey. So if you're looking at starting your business, we can help you with that, help you grow and become the entrepreneur that you want to be. My last presentation, I talked a lot more about this, so feel free to look that one up. But I recommend before you become an entrepreneur, doing some research, getting the groundwork for what you need to learn, because owning a business is more than just the business that you're starting. It's being a bookkeeper, being a manager, everything. And so when you get a loan with Entrepreneur Fund, we take on some riskier clients that can't always get access to commercial lending, but that comes with advice, which is a really cool aspect.
So in Sunbelt and True North, what we are is, I guess, if you think of us as one company with two solutions, right? So our Sunbelt product, we focus on businesses that do up to $10 million in annual revenue. Those are referred to as Main Street businesses. They're the owner-operated businesses of the world. Think if you drive up and down Sheridan Street, right? I mean, that's 80% of the businesses that are out there. Our True North product in mergers and acquisitions, that's more for $10 to $150 million in annual revenue. What we do is we are a full service business brokerage firm. So we help owners exit their business when it's their time to retire, sell their business, whatever it is, right? Typically, we work with family-owned companies, founders who are going to transition it to the next generation, sell to an internal buyer, or make their exit. So we've got business advising, startups, mature, profitable business consulting, helping you start, stabilize, and grow. And the largest business brokerage firm in the Midwest that helps people buy and sell businesses. So none of this to brag, but really just to lend some credibility as to why you can regard the information we share with you today as both valuable and accurate, if that makes sense. So why do people buy businesses, right? If you think about kind of the path to entrepreneurship, there's really two ways, right? You can start up, or you can be an ETA, an entrepreneur through acquisition, right? And there are pros and cons to each. We talked a lot about startups last month's presentation. So this presentation, we're going to focus more on the entrepreneurship through acquisition. And some pros that go hand in hand with that is you get to avoid startup and expansion risk. What is expansion risk? Well, not only could you be buying a business perhaps for the first time, but if you are currently a business owner, most business owners are keenly interested in growing their business. And one of the quickest and most secure ways to do that is by growth through acquisition. Now, that could be a very similar business to yours that really expands your offerings or your footprint, maybe your geographical footprint, right? Or it could be a synergistic capability of what you're doing right now that is going to be a nice solution to bolt onto your current operations, right? And then you get to avoid startup risk if this is going to be your first business. Does anybody know the success rate of startup businesses in America, just in general? If you had to guess a percentage? 50%, 50? Good guess. 15. What's that? Okay. Yeah. 14. No. This isn't The Price is Right. Okay, if nobody else is going to jump out and get it, yeah, 10% is the success rate, right? 1 out of 10. So, Edie, would you like a book or a bottle of wine? That is noble. That is noble and integrity. Okay? Now, does anybody want to take a guess at the success rate for an acquisition entrepreneur, somebody who buys a mature, profitable business? Going. Keep going. Keep going. 98% success rate. Okay. The odds are in your favor to acquire a mature, profitable business. Why? They've done all the work, right? They have the company history, the brand recognition. They have the vendors, the products, the services that are trial by fire have been proven to be wanted by their clients, right? They have a proven cash flow. You're stepping into historical. Good question, right? So that statistic that I'm using is based on SBA, the Small Business Administration, right? Which is a federal agency for the government, which lends on small business acquisitions. And they are using a 98% success rate figure based on acquisitions that have not defaulted on their loan repayments for 5 years after their acquisition. So, yeah. And that same 10% success rate, the reason why I'm using that as a side-by-side comparative is because it's 10% make it past that 5-year mark as a start. So
I want to point out what he said, wait, that there's a 90% success rate when you buy a business that is successful, right? That statistic doesn't apply to if you buy a business that already isn't successful.
that is true. So for the sake of today's discussion, let's assume that we are talking about a mature, profitable business. It has been a company for many years. It's profitable, and the owner is ready to exit the business. So does that make sense? Okay.
So on here, it also says that a good reason to buy a business is because it's easier to secure financing. And it's easy to secure financing because you have that proven record, right? It's not as risky for the bank to take you on it either, if you know that there's going to be enough cash flow to cover that debt coverage.
Did we miss a trivia question answer for somebody who got closest to 98%? No? Okay. Fine. Moving on. Can't even give away a free bottle. Go ahead. Next one. So we talked about this a little bit, right? The benefits of buying an existing business. You get immediate revenue and cash flow instead of having, to start at ground zero, right, and work your way up. You improve products and services, establish brand and reputation, trained employees, right? I mean, like I said, we're stepping into a very efficient operational business here, right? Training from the seller. So that's kind of an interesting one to think about, right? You might be thinking like, well, what type of business could I buy, right? For those of you that don't know, and most people don't, right? Oftentimes when there is a business sale, the previous owner is willing to stick around for a period of time and work with you hand in hand in what's known as a training and transition period to make sure that you can slide into that role and assume their responsibilities in the business. So you get control of the business, the financial reward, and you build long-term equity, right? Any questions? How about that building long-term equity? Does everybody understand that? Okay, nice. Well done, Nick. One of the places to start, right, is to determine if business ownership is for you, right? Even though Minnesota is almost twice as entrepreneurial as the rest of the country, right? Only 7% of people are, right? First, figure out what is your motivation, right? Is it financial freedom? Maybe it's you want to be your own boss. Maybe it's build long-term wealth. I don't know. Secondly, are you willing to take some risk, right? Nobody can remove all the risk, right? There is inherent risk in being the boss and taking on that financial risk and that responsibility. But you can leverage those or mitigate those risks, right? By doing your due diligence and making sure that the opportunity that you do acquire after searching and finding one that you think you're ready to make a move on checks all the boxes and is safe and secure, right? And you have the financial resources.
So as we talked about last month as well, even though you're buying an existing business that has cash flow, you still do need to come in with financial resources to make that business work, right? Banks still want you to have some quote, skin in the game in order to buy a business. So at least 10%, sometimes up to 30, depending on what bank you go with.
And would you do better buying an existing business or starting a new business? I think you guys can tell which way we're leaning in this presentation, so we won't really hit on that. Here's another opportunity for somebody to win wine or book. The true entrepreneur is a doer, not a dreamer. One of my culture creeds, if you will, is having a bias for action and being proactive, not reactive. Nolan Bushnell, that's kind of his famous quote, though. Does anybody know who Nolan Bushnell is and what he's famous for? That's what I thought at first too. Couldn't be further away from the rightest answer. How about what industry is this guy from? Nobody's guessed this yet. I need to change that.
That's what Jess said.
Binoculars, yeah. Chuck E. Cheese. How about that, man? Anybody want to take a guess at how many Chuck E. Cheeses are still active and in business today?
How many?
50. You'd be surprised at how many Chuck E. Cheeses are still around. Not quite that. Maybe at its peak in like 1997, 4,000. Was anybody close to 450?
Sarah was closest to 600.
Did you say, you said 600? That's pretty close. It's like 455 is the most recent number. The line? Ah! Yeah, girl. There go. She's over there. 300, 400, 500, 600. So here's some small business trends. Do you want to go through the numbers and then provide any color?
Sure.
Or I can, I don't care.
You're better with the color.
Okay, sure.
So some small business trends. There are 33 million small businesses in the United States, and 13.5 million are owned by baby boomers. So you know what that means, right? Baby boomers are at that age when they're about to retire, right? Which is going to create a silver tsunami, which is a big trend in our economy that is going to hit us, which means that there's going to be a lot of businesses coming up in the future that are going to be for sale, and that trend has already started. Yeah, so this is the time right now to start preparing for when the small business that you've always wanted to own opens up for sale. And, well, we'll talk about that. So there are 147,000 small businesses in Minnesota. And as Nick said earlier, there's 118,000 that have at least one employee.
So if we want to, for those of you that are sitting here and thinking, maybe entrepreneurship, maybe business ownership is for me. Both Emily and I, first of all, would be happy to sit down and have a conversation with you guys one-on-one and talk about these things, right? But here's kind of a look at the opportunity that's coming. So Emily mentioned the silver tsunami. That is a term coined by Bloomberg Financial in an article they put out in 2020 called The Great Acquisition. And in that, they talked about how statistically, the generation of the baby boomers is set to retire 100% of that age group by 2037, right? So if you do the math, we're 12 years away from that, right? And so if you take a look at just Minnesota, right, 118,000 small businesses that have at least one employee, that's the best metric that we can use as far as what is a saleable business. It's not perfect, right? Because there are plenty of businesses out there that are owner-centric. Maybe they don't have an employee, that are very valuable and very profitable and very saleable, right? But that's just the best metric that we can go by, right? And so if you do the math over the next 12 years, well, let me back up. So of the 118,000, 66% of those statistically are owned by baby boomers, which is going to be 77,880 here in Minnesota. Okay. And so if you do the math, on average, that is going to be 6,490 businesses per year that are going to need to transition to new ownership, right? Divided by 365. That is about just about 18 businesses per day in Minnesota where baby boomers. Yeah. Yeah. So how about that? Isn't that interesting?
I want to say that Nick came up with the title for this slide. If you couldn't change it. I like it. So we want to talk about so we've talked a lot about owning a small business and what that does for you. But let's talk about what owning a small business does for all of us and the benefits for us. And so when you buy a business locally, there's local businesses, $68 of every $100 that are spent remain in this local economy here. Whereas when there's bigger companies that come in that are nationwide, only $13 of every $100 you spend actually stay and circulate locally here. So that's pretty big, and keeping those dollars circulating locally here really helps us all. And then it creates local jobs, right? There's lots of people that are employed by a small business. Sports local events. Who's been to the softball field and seen how many sponsors there are for all softball events in town? Right, so it's supporting all the things that make us have a rich and vibrant economy and lives. It makes our downtowns more inviting, right? If someone comes to town and there's a tourist and there's no place for them to shop, nowhere for them to eat, that doesn't make it very inviting for tourists to come. And it provides services that we all need, right? Like, I like being able to go out to eat. So.
Well said, Emily.
Thanks for small business.
So if you've decided that entrepreneurship is the right path for you, where to begin, right? Really, if you're going to buy a business, you need to be able to determine the value of that business. And there's hundreds of methods out there that you could use to do this, but the three most common methods that you're going to come across, the first of which is going to be the cost method, right? What is the stuff worth, right? How much equipment, how much inventory, is there real estate involved? What's the stuff worth, right? The second major method is going to be the market method, which uses kind of industry rules of thumb, right? For different industries and size of business and all that sort of stuff. And the final major method is going to be the income method, which is, stay with me here, this is where it gets a little bit dry, but it's a multiple of current earnings or projected future earnings, okay? And because the vast majority of actual business buyers will use the income method, like 99.9% of the transactions that we as a firm do, and most small businesses are done around the country, is with the income method, right? That's what we'll focus on today, right? So it's a multiple of the cash flow within that business. And the reason why we do that, if you think, right, is because of what you're actually buying when you buy a small business, right? If you're using the cost method, usually it's kind of a combination of all three, but the most heavily weighted and trusted valuation method is the income method, because what you're doing is buying the future, right? You're buying to gain future income. Otherwise, if you're just buying the assets, you're just buying stuff, right? You're going shopping, right? What you're doing as an entrepreneur is you are investing into your future, right? Not only as a source of income, but a valuable asset, right? That in turn, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road for you, when it's your time to exit, you will be able to sell that tangible and intangible asset too. Right? Basically, the question is, what you're going to do is you're going to look at historical performance, right? You're going to look at 3 to 5 years of historical performance within a business to determine how likely is that to continue on in the future. I know it's a little dry. Is everybody tracking that? Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So what you're going to do with the earnings of the business, and if you guys saw the acronym up there on the slide before this, SDE, what that is seller's discretionary earnings. What we're looking for is the amount of cash flow within a business that an owner will have that will provide benefit to them. Right? You've got revenue, minus your cost of goods sold, minus your operating expenses, equals your SD, right? What's left at the end of the day for the owner to have discretion over, right? And in order to value a business based on that income, if we're going to use the income method evaluation, the income from that business needs to do three things. It needs to pay you, the owner, a livable wage, right? It needs to be able to pay the bank back, and it needs to be able to provide you as the owner a cushion, right? To protect your asset and to make future investments into the business. So as you can see, as we kind of begin to go through this process, you can kind of see why the success rate for an entrepreneur through acquisition is so high, because you have historical, dependable, repeatable financial performance, and you have a tried and tested formula to make sure that it's going to not only pay you a livable wage, but it's going to pay the bank back, and it's going to provide you a cushion, right? Usually most banks won't even lend on a business acquisition unless it's going to pay you the wage, pay them back as the bank, and have a 25% cushion. So again, a very safe and secure way to get into entrepreneurship. This is getting really dry. Well, no, it's dry, but it's important, right? This is why SDE is so important. Okay, so I know that there's some business owners here in the room today, maybe some former business owners, and hopefully some future business owners. But one of the greatest advantages of being a small business owner is that we get to use every legal opportunity that there is to reduce our taxable income. Okay. And what that means is that after we get done working with our accountants, okay, the amount of money that we pay taxes on at the end of the year is significantly reduced in reality to what the earning power of that business is, right? And so for you as potential business buyers, you don't want to miss out on a good opportunity. If you look at the bottom line of a corporate tax return and it says this business makes $15,000 a year, and they're asking you to buy it for a couple $100,000, you know, you're going to look at that and say, well, that doesn't match up. By the way, how are you sending the kids to college? How do you have the nice house and the cars and you go on the vacations and you're only making 15 grand a year? Okay. So what we need to do is we need to recast or clean up those numbers, right? So whatever is in there, right? The contributions to your own investment funds, it could be the self-employed 401k, it could be the Roth, it could be the travel and the meals and the entertainment, it could be the health insurance, it could be the life insurance. Whatever legal opportunity we can use as business owners, right, that provides benefit to us, we get to add that back to the bottom line, which will show what we like to call the true earning power of the business, okay? Along with a lot of non-cash expenses. And I'm not an accountant, so I won't really get into that, but things like depreciation and amortization, those are non-cash expenses that business owners can use to reduce their taxes. And here's why this is so important. And this slide is really why I wanted to jump back and actually go through that with you, okay? Is to allow for an apples to apples comparison, okay? So let's say you're looking at a couple of different opportunities, okay? And in example one, the net income at the bottom line of the corporate tax return is $100,000, okay? Compared to opportunity two, where the net income is $0 on the bottom line of the corporate. Now, surface level, you might think, well, duh, opportunity one is going to be a lot better than opportunity two. But if we recast the financials to find out what the true earning power is, we'll find that example two is actually a little bit better financially, right? In example one, the owner takes a salary of $100,000 and depreciation of 50. Right? So if we add all of those up, 100 plus 100 plus 50, example one has an SDE or a cash flow of $250,000. Okay. Now in example two, where this owner is not making any money, right? But he takes a salary of $300,000. Okay. And depreciation of $50,000, and then we find some personal perks in there, $50,000. Okay, so really the SDE of that business is $400,000. Oh, I did unplug it.
Did you?
I think so.
I got you. I got you.
Should I continue with a lot of voice, or do you need this for the online? Okay. So when you compare apples, go ahead. You know, that would be like the add back stuff, the health insurance, the life insurance, the travel, the meals, the entertainment, the funding of the 401ks, the Roths. A lot of people have their personal automobiles, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good. Okay, we're back on. Do you want to jump in on any of these, or do you want me to keep going? Okay, I'll keep going. So now we've got, right, in the previous slide, we have an example of, you know, what was it, $250,000 and $400,000. Does everybody understand kind of why it's so important to actually look through the financials instead of just the bottom line? Okay, any questions on that? Okay. So when you're looking at a business too, it's not going to be just the financials, right? Obviously, if you're going to buy this and work in it, right, as an owner operator, you're going to want to look at kind of some of the key characteristics within a business to determine not only is it something that you want to buy and work in, right, but is it attractive enough to sell? And what these are often referred to as our value drivers within the business, okay? And some things that are going to make a business more attractive, right? And the reason why we do this with value drivers is because what we're looking for as an investor or as a business buyer, what we are looking to do, we are looking either for the growth opportunity or the investment risk, okay? If we are going to invest tens of thousands of dollars into a business opportunity, we want to manage our investment risk and put that money into an opportunity that is going to provide us with growth opportunities, right? And so opportunities for growth, things that are going to indicate that in a growing industry, you're going to have proprietary products, maybe high barriers to entry, strong brand reputation. That could be kind of tied to company history. How long in business has that business been in business? Wow, that was a mouthful. And also too, in today's day and age, what's their presence like online, right? Sure, a company's been in business for 50 years, but how engaged are they with their customers before, during, and after the sale? Are their customers loyal? Right? Do they have consistent revenues and earnings, or are their earnings and revenues maybe lumpy and project-based, right? Like my daughter she's obsessed with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, right? Okay. And if I make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for her and I just put a lump of peanut butter and a lump of jelly in the middle of that bread and I don't spread it around, she's very dissatisfied with me and she won't eat it. But if I take the time to spread the peanut butter from edge to, crust to crust, right, and make I'm talking about like a nice peanut butter and jelly sandwich, same principle, right? How consistent and spread out throughout the year are those revenues and earnings, right? Because that is less risky than project lumpy based revenues, okay? And how owner-centric is the business, right? Having some employees in place is going to be a good indicator of whether or not that's owner-centric. Owner-centric meaning, owner-centric meaning like for my business, my M&A business, right? As a business broker, very owner-centric. Okay, if I go on vacation, I got to bring my phone, I got to bring my laptop, otherwise work isn't getting done. That's how it is, right? Conversely, right, some business owners can go on vacation for a week or 2 weeks, leave the phone and the laptop at home and enjoy themselves. And when they come back, business has just been chugging along. Right?
So,
thank you.
What we've talked about, and a thing that I keep bringing up is preparation is key if you're going to buy a business. So what do you need? You need money, plus collateral, plus some skills, and a plan, and your deal team. Deal team, someone like Mick. And then you could have a successful business acquisition. Any questions on that? We thought we were very clever when we came up with this formula.
That's the formula right there.
All right, so there's lots of ways to buy a business, right? You can just come in and have a lot of money, but most people don't, and so you need to involve a bank. And so there are lots of lenders that can help. The SBA, the Small Business Administration, has a lot of different programs they can help with that. The Entrepreneur Fund, offers all of these programs. There's lots of banks that also offer programs that are really meant to help people who might not have all of the collateral that you need. Some of these products really help, offset some of those risks for the bank. Anyone have any questions on those?
Financing.
What?
Seller financing.
Oh, yes, and the other big one is seller financing that you can use. And so the business seller could offer you a bit of a loan to help fill the gap, right? If a bank doesn't cover everything. And so you can pay that buyer back. That helps them reduce the capital gains that they have to pay. And it helps you have the money to be able to do this business. So you just pay that previous owner over time. Nick.
So before moving on, okay, so let's think of this objectively through the eyes of a buyer and a seller, right? What do you think most business owners want to do when they retire? Do you think that they want to self-finance the acquisition to the buyer? Or do you think they want to get cashed out and sail off into the sunset?
Cashed out.
Cashed out, right? Zero risk. Bank pays you. Oftentimes it's not 100%, but usually up to 90% of the business purchase price, and they carry a very small line of seller financing to the buyer, right? How attractive do you think that is as a business buyer to find a business owner who's willing to seller finance the business? Right? Extremely, right? First of all, as a buyer, you don't have to mess with the SBA, which can be a cumbersome process if you work with somebody like any of the local banks that do SBA lending, or Emily, right? They can really help streamline that process and make it easier than it is, right? But secondly, I think it shows that the owner has extreme confidence in the future success of their business if they're willing to seller finance, right? Because they're taking, let's say it's a $500,000 business, buyer puts $100,000 down, they're taking a $400,000 risk on the future success of that business. So if you can find an owner that's willing to do seller financing, still do your due diligence, but that's a very good sign, right? So.
Is seller financing a red flag?
No, I don't think it's a red flag at all. You have to do your due diligence, right? And buying a business isn't like a house where it's like, okay, here's my offer, when do we close, right? It's more of a, hey, here's my contingent offer of purchase. In other words, a letter of intent, right? Here's the price, here are the terms, contingent on me getting to do financial forensics on your tax returns, your P&Ls with my accountant to make sure that what you're telling me lines up, right? And then I get to dive into the daily operations with you as the business owner. What systems are you using? What processes are you using? And there's 2 to 3 months of transferring things into you as the business owner, where at any point during those 3 months, if anything doesn't check out, right, it's okay, goodbye, that's not for me. So still do your due diligence, right? I think if anything, it would, as a buyer, it would only increase my impression of the future success of the business.
I would still say banks still would not want the whole project, right, to be like bank financed plus seller finance, right? You still need to come in with some equity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are we switching between?
All right, so checklist for purchasing a business. Number 1, you got to do your due diligence, right? You want to get the last 3 years of tax returns, previous profit and loss statements, right? Sometimes the profit and loss statements don't exactly match what's on the taxes, so you want to make sure you're looking at both. You want anything that's happening in the current year, right? Like something could have completely changed in the current year, so you want as most up-to-date financials as you can get. And you want to compare that to the year to date of the previous year, right? So you can compare, right? A lot of businesses, especially in Ely, do most of their business in the summertime. So if you only look at the first 6 months of the year, it might not give a good look at what's happening business for the year. And then sales for the past 12 months, any existing leases or contracts that are in place, right? You need to know those are going to be in place when you take over the business as well. And looking at the cash flow statement, right? your profit and loss statement is not necessarily the same as your cash flow statement. You want to make sure that the business has enough dollars that are able to go into your bank account to be able to cover all of your expenses.
So you see how in-depth of a process that is, and that's just the financial due diligence, right? You're gonna want to do due diligence on customers, right? And make sure there's no large customer concentrations, like, hey, does any one customer account for 50% or more of your revenue? That's risk, right? And so that's part of that value driver stuff that we'll look at, but yeah, the due diligence process for buying a business, it protects you on your investment. Any questions on that so far? So how to find a business for sale? You can contact a business broker. You can go to any of the dozens of business acquisitions websites that are out there. Biz Buy Sell, Sunbelt Midwest. This is kind of like a little snippet of what it's going to look like if you're online looking for a business to buy. Typically, you're going to see some form of confidential headline, right, to just grab your attention. Fence installation company with crew, seasonal home-based, seller financing, right? And then you'll get a little snapshot of the details of the business financials, revenue, cash flow, asking price, and what they're looking for a down payment. So here's a good example, right? Down payment of $40,000 can buy you about a $70,000 cash flow. Right? So if you think about your return on cash investment, right, you're looking at, I don't know, year one, I mean, you get, what is that, almost 80%, 180% return on your cash investment there, if my numbers are correct. But
other things that you can do is you can talk to your employer, right? Like a lot of employers want to see their business go on to people that are currently working in it and know it best, right? They're going to run it more like the current owner is running it. And then forming genuine relationships with owners. So that can be when you
Start laughing.
So forming genuine relationships with owners. So you don't want to just come into a business and say, hey, I'm going to buy your business. You want to make sure you form a relationship with them so that you're a trusted person, and then you eventually can approach the subject of buying their business.
So one quick, we're going to be wrapping up here pretty quick, but just one little, so my company invested a lot of money into doing a nationwide survey with the EPI, the Exit Planning Institute, a couple of years ago. We interviewed thousands of business owners across the country on their state of awareness and preparedness for their transition out, right? And we found that 57% of small business owners would prefer to transition their company to an internal buyer, an employee or a family member or something like that. So if you've got the entrepreneurial bone and you are working for a small business owner, understand that the reality is that they are going to exit their business someday, right? And if you have interest in that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with approaching them. Okay, real quick, debunking myths. You need a ton of cash, okay? Yes, you need some money, but you're not going to be buying this thing all cash, right? If seller financing is in play, I mean, that's negotiable. Sellers are going to want some form of a down payment, skin in the game from the buyer. If you're going bank financing, you can get by with as little as 10% of the acquisition price as a down payment, right? So $100,000 business for $10,000 down, $200,000 business for $20,000 down. Okay, so you can buy yourself into a six-figure income with, you know, $20,000 to $30,000 down pretty easily. Opportunities will find you. We touched on that just on the previous slide a little bit. They're not just going to fall into your lap. If you're looking to buy a business, you can contact me. You can go on those websites. You can talk to Emily. You can talk to business owners. But you're going to have to put in the work to kind of bird dog those opportunities. Okay. The seller knows what their business is worth. Big myth. I meet with and speak with owners all day, every day, 365. And 9 times out of 10, they have rosy, what is it? What's the term? Yeah, thank you. Not that they're super unrealistic by any means, but it would be wise to do your own due diligence, right? And pull some comps and do your own studies to figure out what a business is worth. It is safer to start your own business versus buy one. We already went through that. You can figure it out on your own. I highly suggest you work with people like, if a business broker is not involved, work with the Entrepreneur Fund. There's tons of resources. SCORE, Northland Small Business Development Center. There's a ton of
Economic development authority.
yeah, there's tons of free resources out there that you guys can find. Buying a business is not complicated if you have a deal team put together. Again, nobody can remove all the risk. I'm not advocating for that, but if you do your due diligence, you can significantly mitigate your risks and buy yourself into a very good business. And it's too expensive to finance. We already touched on that. So let's keep rolling. We've only got a couple minutes. Oh, perfect. Kill it. Okay. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your being here and spending time with us. Is there anybody that's had their eye on this? I was like waiting for a trivia question to come up.
Tell us about it. Have you read it?
I never give away a book that I haven't intended on reading. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so we have a few minutes for questions and answers. What kind of questions do you guys have? Say it again. A lot. Yep. Yeah, I do, currently I have, I'd say probably 20 to 25 active businesses looking to exit. They're not all here in Ely. Some of them are. I focus on the Arrowhead region though, and a lot of those might be able to be ran semi-absentee from a remote location or even relocatable businesses. So, and I'm just a small piece of the pie as to what's available out there, but yes, I do have business opportunities available. So thank you, Beth. Good question. Yeah, so I've got business cards. In fact, I have a meeting today at 11 o'clock with somebody who came to my buying a business presentation at the chamber last year. They've been looking through our listings and have seen a few that they're interested in. So I'm meeting up with them at 11 o'clock today to talk about the path to acquisition for them. So yeah, reach out to me, send me an email. My cards are over there. I'm around town. I live here. I office here, pull me side at ups or something like that.
I think we got a wrap, but thank you so much.
Okay.